I think we'll get started now. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship October presentation. This is we're having with us tonight Vandorn Hinnant, and his presentation is Aligning with Sacred Geometry, the Technology of Consciousness. And so I wanted to, I'm glad everyone's here, and we're still getting a couple more people in the door. And if this is the first time that you're here, we welcome you. And if it's the second time or third time that you've been here, welcome back. We're glad to have you. My name is Smith Prim. I'm the co-chairman for the Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, along with Catherine Smart, who is also our writer and editor. Kim Kasdorf is our media director who takes the video and puts it together and helps make it YouTube ready so that you'll be able to watch that later on. I tell you, we get a lot of revisits, and we've had some wonderful speakers, and I'm really looking forward to Vandorn tonight. Eileen Jenna, she's with us tonight too. She's our program coordinator and finds the wonderful speakers that we bring to you. So welcome, Eileen, too. Wanted you to know, and I say this every time, but this is important. We're here for you. We want you to know that SFF is here for you. Our nonprofit, all volunteer run organization is here to help you develop and enhance your spiritual, mystical, and metaphysical awareness and consciousness. We do this by sponsoring programs like the one tonight, designed to facilitate your personal growth and development and a holistic and spiritual approach to health and living. The program is being recorded. So what I offer to you is, if you don't want your face to be on the video or at all, just turn your camera off. And also, I noticed everybody did it as they came in. Their microphones were muted. That really helps a lot so that we don't get maybe dogs barking in the background or babies crying. That's not that there's anything wrong with that. Just maybe it interrupts the meeting a little bit. So before we get started, I like to do like a 3-breath meditation to help us kind of lose what we don't need and bring our focus into where we are. So if you'll join me, just kind of close your eyes for a minute, or let them close a little bit, and take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out anything that you need to let go that has been part of your day that is not needed anymore. So take one more breath in. Breathe in love and light. And exhale everything else you don't need. And one last cleansing breath in. And release. And welcome back. That's quick, but it helps us get our mind centered where we're going tonight. I'm really honored to introduce our speaker tonight, Vandorn Hinnant. I'll tell you a little bit about Vandorn. He is a distinguished visual artist, poet, and educator, and he's based in Durham, North Carolina. Vandorn's art career spans over 50 years, and his work is dedicated to elevating the human mind and spirit. His pieces have been featured in numerous exhibitions, including the North Carolina Museum of Art's Afro-American Artists. Vandorn has also taught at Duke University's Osher Lifelong Learning Institute and Winston-Salem University. And his works can be found in corporate and private collections across North America, Europe, and Africa. In Vandorn's words, communication is the central theme of my work. These geometries are imbued with natural intelligence, echoing the eternal verities known to ancient civilizations. By aligning my work with the golden ratio and the harmonic frequencies of nature, I create art that resonates with living organisms and environments. So I would now like to introduce Vandorn Hinnant.
Greetings, everyone. Happy to be here. Can you hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. So I would simply like to get started, if that's okay. I don't really need to say anything more. Thanks for the introduction. And so let's rock and roll, as they say in the comic books. Now, so what do we do in regards to starting the PowerPoint presentation?
So use your share and share the event, your presentation again.
Okay, wonderful. Here we go. Yeah. All right, I see now. All right. So this is the first slide, and now my screen is covered with a number of I guess we'll call them panels. Of course, and that's going to be interesting. I'm going to have to get rid. Let me see. Okay, I moved that. Wonderful. So this diagram on the right is composition from 1999. It happens to be 7 Flower of Life panels. And the same thing is in the center, in the background of this next slide. That's 7 Flower of Life panels tied together, which is more than a notion to talk about. So I'll simply say that this image that you see now is an installation that was at several exhibitions that I had at universities. So everybody can read the text. I don't need to read that. I'll simply say that the polyhedron that is suspended from the ceiling, floated over these 6 pedestals, represent the 5 platonic solids plus 1. And if you can see my arrow at the far right, composition is called a rhombic dodecahedron. And so it doesn't qualify as a platonic solid, but it happens to be one of the most important polyhedrons of all times. And we can't talk about that now. But I will say that the one on the far left, instead of it being a 4-sided polyhedron, which would be a tetrahedron, it's actually a 12-faced polyhedron made with 12 golden rectangles. And I might not say much more about the golden ratio tonight, but we'll see. We'll see if we get there. Okay. Sacred geometry is a lost science of consciousness that is now being restored to a place of relevance in the human experience. It is the science and the soul of true art. It is evidence of how consciousness articulates itself into matter. It is both the map and the terrain. We can see it as evidence of sentience in nature. There is a well-documented human fascination with computer-generated fractals. What is possibly obscure is the fact that the fractal phenomenon has been part of the human experience for centuries. The designs of some traditional African villages is documented evidence. African Fractals by Ron E. Glash covers that. Many ancient cultures made images that can now be interpreted as having the qualities of a fractal. Much of what we see in nature are spirals that embody the golden ratio. Geometric analysis of these spirals shows evidence of the fractal phenomenon. This is the simplest definition that I know of for a fractal. It is a self-replicating pattern to scale. And if that's technobabble for some, I apologize. It simply means that if you were to take a floor filled with either equilateral triangles or squares, if you had a floor tiled with equilateral triangles or squares, if you take one square and multiply it by 4, you have a square that is essentially 4 times the size of the original square. And you can continue to double those square sizes. So you'd have 4 squares, and you could multiply that by, let's say, 4, and you would have a larger square. That's a fractal phenomenon. And that can be color-coded to make it easy to read. Many times fractals want to be read using color. We begin our exploration into this subject with this image, an abacus, pardon me, please. I think I'm stumbling over words. An abacus for learning. The following presented interpretations wish to be entertained. The circles in this diagram have something in common. They each share a radius with their 6 neighboring circles. So what you're looking at is, on the right-hand side, is a highlighted circle in the center. That would be the first circle that you would lay down on a plane where you're creating something called the seed of life. So what I have done, I've introduced something called an abacus for learning for the purpose of helping people to see more than can be seen when you simply draw a single circle on a blank piece of paper, and then you draw a second circle. You can see these two highlighted circles here in the center of the page. That's the first circle at the bottom, and then the second circle at the top. And then you go to the next frame and you have three circles. So you have the first circle here, second circle above it, and then the third circle to the right of it. So some of you have a relationship to geometry from school and what have you, and notions such as Venn diagrams. These relationships can be talked about in terms of Venn diagrams and, of course, in terms of traditional geometry. Let's see now. Here's the first four circles of the seed of life, and I'm trusting that everybody can see the distinction between the black circles in the background and these four highlighted circles in purple. And then the next frame, you have the first five circles of the seed of life. Then you have the first six circles, and then you have the seventh circle. So that's the seed of life depicted on the right-hand side of the screen. Some people may have never heard this title before, this term, but we jump from the seed of life to the flower of life. And what happens is you take the first 7 circles and you add, 12 more circles on the outer perimeter, and you have something called the flower of life. And once again, I'm showing you this on a ground of unit circles. Some of us call them unit circles. All of these circles share a radius, and that has a metaphysical meaning that we want to look at. Okay. All right, so I can't read Smith. I can't read what's at the very top of the frame because of a bar that's at the top, and I don't know how to get rid of that bar.
I'm not sure. I don't see a bar. I can see every number we can imagine can be expressed.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Well, here's the next frame. An abacus for learning has many messages embedded within it. We will focus on the most obvious. The first 2 circles sharing a radius, with the radius generally thought of and expressed as a straight line, is a graphic statement about the notion of equal. These circles have a very specific relationship with one another. The center of one circle touches the circumference of the other circle. This quality of relationship is shared between these 2 circles. Some of us recall such a relationship referenced as a Venn diagram. I'm repeating some of what I said earlier, but that's to be expected since I'm not able to. Yeah, I'm really trusting. Okay.
If I can help you in any way, let me know. If I can read something for you, I will.
Well, I'm having the challenge with the mouse being curiously and strangely sensitive. Smith, can you tell me what the first line says? The atomic relation.
The atomic relationships in the many and varied crystals in nature are all shown to have geometric patterns.
Okay. All of life is one gigantic ocean of consciousness with myriad discernible geometries or geometric patterns. And I want the audience to know I happen to be a poet also, so much of my language is poetic and metaphoric, but I'm trusting that will not confuse people who think rationally and linearly. And I hope you can appreciate there's a little implied humor here because we do have people that do think rationally and linearly, and we have people that speak and think poetically, such as myself. And oftentimes the 2 types of thinkers have a challenge communicating with one another. The dynamics of radius sharing is repeated across the entire plane of circles. That simply means that each one of these circles shares a radius with its neighbor. This can be read as a symbolic statement about all souls being created equal. What I'm suggesting here is that this image is a metaphysical, spiritual commentary. This idea has not been popular among humans due to overriding distortions in consciousness. This is a subject worthy of exploration. I'm proposing this diagram to be a graphic representation of the notion of equal and equality. It is my contention that we are looking at a pattern that is to be read as a notion such as equality between all. This places this diagram in the category of timeless cosmic glyphs and possibly timeless wisdom. Ideas have a life of their own. Let us view this idea as being one worthy of consideration. You know, we have this language from the past, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and most people who are watching this presentation know what subliminal seduction is. And so it is my contention that humans have two ways of behaving. One is to be on the take, and they use subliminal seduction to seduce people into places that are uncomfortable and unhealthy, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are people who are attempting to give something, to embellish people's or add dimension to people's lives. And so they're busy giving something. My contention is that these geometries that you're looking at have to do with, I'll call them cryptograms, okay? And so I'm claiming that there's some subliminal seduction here. And that seduction is to seduce our attention towards the notions of beauty, okay? These ideas have seldom been considered, since the majority of humans are programmed to think in terms of numbers on a straight number line. It can be viewed as having two distinct directions, with the idea being that each direction can be considered a possible pointing to infinity. And I'm sure everybody understands that if you have a number line, you have 0 in the middle, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and infinitum going to in one direction, and then you have the negative numbers, minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and infinitum. Practically everybody on the planet has been conditioned to think in terms of number lines when we think about numbers. But the abacus for learning and these geometries that you're looking at here are attempting to introduce some different thoughts or some different considerations. So one way to introduce lines is to draw a straight line between the intersections of circles with circles. That is actually shown here to your right. This includes the notion of drawing a straight line from the center of one circle to the center of another circle on the abacus for learning. 2, or B, is to draw a straight line between an intersection of circles to an intersection of lines. And then the third way of introducing a line is simply drawing a straight line between two intersections of lines with lines. And that isn't depicted here, but you can imagine that where you have all of the green lines that cross each other, if you draw a straight line from one of those intersections of 3 green lines to another intersection of 3 green lines, I guess I should say diagonally across a diamond shape. That's what the third statement is referencing, drawing a line from this point to that point. Can you see where my cursor is moving from one point to another? Smith, can you see that?
Yes, I can. And I wanted to also, I like the comments that you're bringing, and any that you can, like, what's the relationship of the diamond to the other parts of the circle? What you're saying?
Well, this is a fractal image, and watch this. Let me draw a diamond shape in green, starting right here at the center of this circle. Draw a diamond shape going across horizontally, then down to this point, then across to this point, and then back up to that point. Well, that diamond shape happens to be, let's see, it has 2 equilateral triangles in it, large equilateral triangles, and it has 8 smaller equilateral triangles in it. So the smaller equilateral triangles are 1/4 of the next sized equilateral triangle. That makes that dynamic what would be called a 2-iteration or a 2-tier fractal. But once again, most people are not familiar with this type of conversation in terms of fractals. So you can keep adding larger equilateral triangles like the one that I'm drawing here is pointing up. That equilateral triangle and its mirror image is down below. Those 2 equilateral triangles are part of a fractal pattern, because you have smaller diamond shapes inside of it. So here's a smaller diamond shape inside of that larger diamond shape. So I'm not interested in counting, but we'll simply say that you're looking at the phenomenon of fractal, okay? And here's a drawing from my mentor, It has everything to do with the golden proportion. Smith, can you read the first two lines for me, because I can't see them because of...
Sure can. Exercises with drawing lines can be considered related to the notion of counting lengths,
which humans have been conditioned to be preoccupied with for centuries. There is an alternative view worthy of consideration. This is the notion that these relationships can be looked at or viewed as having to do with visual expressions of qualities of relationships. This view is disconcerting to a mind that has been formatted, that is programmed to think only in terms of quantities expressed on a number line. I am asking for you to consider sitting with what has just been stated. We can consider the possibility of the masses having been hypnotized to think primarily in terms of quantities of numbers rather than qualities in relationships. A future moment will come when what has been just stated will become clear. Here's another diagram, the same phenomenon. This has everything to do with the golden proportion. And you can see 5-pointed stars here. You can see smaller 5-pointed stars and larger 5-pointed stars. There is a previously published thesis I am a contributor to that illustrates insights into number theory that is yet to be ingested, digested, and assimilated by humankind. The title of this thesis is The Rest of Euclid, an Ancient Architecture of Arithmetic and the Modern Theory of Number. This book illustrates a variety of principles alluded to here. If we begin our approach to the subject of sacred geometry, also known in some circles as the geometry of art and life, with serious consideration to all that has been stated about the abacus for learning, we will be richly rewarded in ways that can only become clear through a sincere and direct engagement via personal experience. What I'm suggesting here is that to actually do drawings makes a world of difference. To see them, yes, there's a transfer of information, there is an impression that's being made upon one's psyche, but to actually do the drawings, and a few people that are on the call have actually done drawings, it really is a transformative experience. And let's see now. Okay.
I have a quick question. If you could add a little insight into the abacus of learning, what that is.
Okay. Let me scroll back to that diagram right there is what I have considered to be the image that we can use to learn about sacred geometry on. So this would be a backdrop. So you saw earlier where we have, that's the flower of life pattern. And then before that, we have the seed of life pattern, which is there. So the first pattern of circles, let's call it the seed of life. That's the heart and soul of the flower of life. And this has been taught about by many people, Drunvalo Melchizedek, and there are literally dozens of people that are talking about and teaching about the flower of life. But these two-dimensional geometries are actually referenced to three-dimensional phenomenon. And we're going to talk about, we're going to allude to that later when we talk about the embryo and the egg, the division of the cell division that takes place in all living organisms. You have a multiplication variable there. So this flat plane image wants to actually represent spheres that have the same relationship that the circles have to one another. So you would have spheres that are interlocking spheres. Very difficult to talk about in words. We have one person on the call tonight. His name is Herb Bennett. He and another person named Michael, can't think of Michael's last name right now. They have been working with this alternate view of geometry for decades. And they have both developed a thesis independent of one another, but it's related to what I just spoke of, and that is to actually have these three-dimensional geometries where you would have interlocking spheres. There's a person that's my junior by some years, his name is Terrence Howard, who has stirred up a lot of hornet's nest in the field of consciousness, because he's talking about things that don't make sense to many people who are programmed with material science orientations. I'm not claiming that everything that Terrence Howard says is an absolute, but I can simply say that he has some very interesting and very amazing deep insights into this three-dimensional geometry that I'm alluding to here. Prem, did I, Scott, did it, I'm sorry,
Smith.
Yeah, right.
Any of those will work.
Yeah, but your name is very difficult. I've never seen that name before, Smith Prem. So Smith, did I answer your question by chance? Did I speak to it?
You did. I was hoping, and the reason I asked it, in case anybody else was a little, I'm a little familiar with sacred geometry, but I wasn't quite clear on some of those terms, and that was one of them. The abacus. I know an abacus is the thing that you use the sliders, you slide the little numbers. Right. It's a calculator.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for using the word abacus, because I was taught that the word was abacus, and so were most people in America. But I have a friend who's of German ancestry, and she claims that the correct pronunciation of the word is abacus or abacus. And so I've been trying to, retrain myself or recondition myself. But most of us are familiar with the word being abacus. So this abacus that we are all familiar with, I use the term abacus or abacus for learning simply because I'm talking about the phenomenon of counting. So I believe there's a statement that I have made someplace. It may be premature to say it now, but I'm actually going to say it. If we look at this diagram, we're looking at a square that has a bunch of small circles on it. But if you imagine this to be an infinite plane, and I mean an infinite plane, if you can imagine that, that's the same thing as talking about a number line. A number line can be thought of as being infinite, meaning you can count infinitely in the positive integers and infinitely in the negative integers. What I'm suggesting is that every one of these circles represents a number, or they can be considered representing a number. Not that we are trying to be rational and linear here, but I'm simply speaking poetically and more metaphorically about the phenomenon of relationship. And so I'm attempting to shift our attention from rational linear thinking to what I will call spherical thinking, okay? S-P-H-E-R-I-C-A-L. And I don't have examples. Another beautiful soul is named Eric Rankin. He's done a tremendous amount of beautiful work that speaks to this phenomenon of spheres as opposed to circles populating space. But I'll have to apologize to everyone. I'm not trying to represent everything that can be represented in this presentation. I am alluding to the notion that this flat plane here represents an infinite number of circles that all have the very same relationship to one another. And each one of these circles not only represents an individual, but it actually represents a sphere. And this wants to be thought of as a three-dimensional phenomenon. So, Buckminster Fuller, some of you know Buckminster Fuller, we have the closest packing of spheres that he talked about. And once again, I have to apologize to people that do not have a background with these geometries. This is an introduction. This is something to whet your appetite with and ask you to go look more deeply into it if you are so inclined. And that's a seed of life that's drawn on the sand on the beach, Ricefield Beach. My wife and I have done this now for many years. And here's a quote on the right that I'll simply have you, I'll read it. Every thought is an action of creation, and every feeling is an act of creation. The human imagination is where creation emerges from onto the screen of the world. Let us awaken to our roles as co-creators and dream a new world where love rules the day and leads the way. The notion that the human imagination is where creation emerges from onto the screen of the world, that's a notion that's being talked about by many people. I'm not recalling some of the names now. Some of you are familiar with some of the people who are suggesting to us notions such as the idea that all reality is contained inside our minds. I'm not arguing that that's true or untrue, I'm simply saying that the imagination is, in my estimation, where it's sort of like the seed or the spring from which the waters of life flow or consciousness flow. But once again, I'm attempting to speak poetically to something that can only be experienced as an individual. Words don't tell the story. Here's an old quote of mine: one's philosophy wants to be the heart and soul of one's art. The diagram that you see in the background is a diagram where lines are drawn between all of the possible relationships that I spoke of earlier. Lines drawn from the centers, or from the intersections of lines with lines, intersections of lines with circles, and intersections of circles with circles. Here's a quote from Rudolf Steiner. Some of you are familiar with his works and his teachings. And the first line, I can't read it because the screen is over, well, there's a panel over it. So the shadow cast by the spirit in space. Smith, can you read the first line for me?
The shadow cast by the spirit in space is beauty. This shadow becomes a living being through the artist's creative spirit.
All right. However long people may ponder how to banish from the world through outer means, crime and wrong, true healing of evil into good will lie for the human soul in a future, in the fact that true art will pour like a spiritual fluid into human souls and human hearts, so that these souls and hearts of men and women, when they are wisely surrounded by what has been created as architectural, sculptural, and other art forms, will, if they are given to lying, cease to lie, or if they are given to breaking the peace, will cease to disturb the peace of their fellows. Buildings, for instance, will begin to speak. They will speak a language of which today people do not even dream. Just as the spirits of nature have given to humankind a larynx, similarly, we put at the disposal of the universe such an organ when we create the right artistic forms. They become then the means whereby the gods can speak to us. Art is the creation of organs through which the gods can speak to humans. Rudolf Steiner. For those that don't know, Rudolf Steiner wrote more books than I can expect to read for the rest of my life. Many books, volumes and volumes of books. And his teachings are available in cyberspace. So if anyone's interested, there's a ton of information that is available to us, the history of Rudolf Steiner's work. In witnessing, that is, viewing these works of art and geometric diagrams, one has an opportunity to make inferences about the relationships between the geometries and the manifold patterns we see in nature. What I want to say, Smith and company, that is, all attendees, that we are close to the halfway mark. We can take an intermission and ask questions about what's been presented, or we can keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's a great time to interact and maybe take some questions on the first part that you presented.
All right, beautiful. Okay.
If you have a question, just raise your hand, and I'll identify you, and then you can share your question and unmute, please. I see Chuck has a question.
As you were talking, that original pattern that was I think the flower of the life, the basic, very first one you showed us, that one there. I think when I look at that, I see a lot of cubes, three-dimensional
Yes.
cubes.
Yeah, the lines actually help you to see the cubes too, right?
Yeah. Is that like the cube of space or something, or?
Well, Chuck, the reality is that, any image is going to mean something different to different people. We're projecting onto the blank screen of life the concepts that we walk with. So if nobody had ever told you what a cube was, you wouldn't necessarily see a cube because there would be no concept. And what I'm suggesting here is that because we have concepts like a cube, we can actually see how this diagram might represent a cube. But I'm not attempting to represent a cube intentionally. It just so happens that there are lines that are emanating from the center of this complex that makes it easy for us to imagine that we're looking at a cube. And then if you look at the outer perimeter of the hexagonal form, once again, a mind familiar with the concept of cube will say, oh, I'm looking at a cube, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't intentional.
Okay.
Yes.
It's three-dimensional though.
Yeah, right. But see, the beauty is that each one of us carry a tremendous amount of knowing inside of our psyche. So when we interact with a symbol or life experience, we bring to the equation whatever I don't want to say no, but in a manner of speaking, whoever and whatever we are, we're projecting that onto the experience. And so, you're projecting your familiarity with the cube, and you call it the cube of space. Yes, that has great meaning, but no, I'm just simply offering a pattern that might remind one of many and varied things. And the Flower of Life does that for people. Some of you know that inside of the Flower of Life pattern, you can see references to all of the other, well, let's just say the 5 platonic solids. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And we're going to have our question and answer at after we take a break at around 8:25. So we'll have the 30 minutes to talk a little bit more about it. But I felt like this was a good time, and thank you, Vandorn. If you had questions, because there's so much information that you're sharing with us, and I certainly have more questions for later too.
Okay, so Chuck, you see this one that I'm circling right now on the screen? That form, that polyhedron, suspended from the ceiling.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, that's actually a cube that has all of its 3 body diagonals inside of it. So you have, on the outside there's a cube, but on the inside are the 3 body diagonals from the 6 corners or the 8 corners of the cube. Or is that 4? No, I get confused sometimes. Does a cube have 4 body? Yes, a cube has 4 body diagonals, not 3. So you have 4 body diagonals inside of the cube, and that's why some of those extra lines are seen there. Unfortunately, the form is turned in such a way that you can't read it as a cube, but that actually represents a cube. Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's almost like it's like that on the paper, all those things. It's like a medium for casting your projections or something onto.
Right, exactly, yes. And so, and that's what Rudolf Steiner was suggesting, that, beauty is that, I'm going to say beauty is consciousness projected onto space. Yeah, that's another interesting and curious statement that can be made. Beauty is consciousness projected onto and into space. Yeah, but we could wax metaphysically until the end of time, and we would probably have a lot of fun. Some of you in the audience might know the term zikar. It comes from an ancient tradition. I think of it as coming from a Sufi tradition, where you have people who are in this prayerful state, the state of reverence for the one and the many. And so this saying of these, this bubbling to the surface of revelations takes place in this assembly of individuals. It can be 2 or more. Sometimes it's a great many people who are there to witness this bubbling to the surface of the divine that can come through and speak through anyone at any moment. And it's a beautiful experience. I think of myself as being in this state when I think about Hafiz, and I think about Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, and Hafiz, and many other of the ancient mystic poets. My conversations with them appear to be transtemporal, if I may. Yes. Is there another question or thought about this material that we have presented?
Maybe Catherine, did you have a question?
Well, there's a question in the chat from Ty Collins. Ty, do you want to speak up?
Well, yes. Hi. I just had a question about the idea of bubbles that touch share radii. And so does this object, a bubble, align with the theory of the abacus for learning? Is it the same concept?
Yes. What happens is if you take the abacus for learning, the two-dimensional statement that I'm calling an abacus for learning, and if you translate that to three-dimensionality, so you have spheres now that share a center, that everything that you do two-dimensionally, it, how do I say this? Implies something that happens three-dimensionally. So I appreciate the question. I have many beautiful examples here that I don't have in front of me that I can't share of this phenomenon of taking polyhedron and building relationships inside of a polyhedron that ends up being a fractal phenomenon. And so any of the 5 platonic solids can fit inside of a sphere. And one of the defining qualities is that this, from the center to the corner of any of the 5 platonic solids is the same, and they all fit inside of a sphere. So if you take a tetrahedron, which has 4 equilateral triangles, and you go to the center of the tetrahedron, and you draw a line to the circumference of the outer perimeter of the sphere that it's nested in, that distance from the center of that tetrahedron to that corner is the same for all of the other corners. And
right.
That also implies that you could put an incomprehensibly large number of tetrahedrons inside of a sphere, and they would all have the same type of relationship with the sphere. So, you know, some people would say an uncountable number of tetrahedron can be nested inside of a sphere, just as someone might think that an uncountable number of cubes, octahedrons, etc., icosahedrons can be nested inside of a sphere. That's kind of like an interesting and curious idea, but we cannot prove that to be an absolute truth, and we cannot disprove it to be an untruth.
Right.
So it's an open, it's a question that doesn't have an absolute or rigid answer in regards to the three-dimensional dynamics that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it would be
Sorry,
lovely.
I think Joseph has a question.
Yes.
Joseph, did you want to ask a question?
Sure.
Follow instructions. Gotcha. Yeah, all right. Good.
We have two
So to
Josephs.
follow
Okay.
that thread about the tetrahedrons that can be seen inside of the solids, which can be seen inside the flower of life. The drawing you did before, Vandorn, where you actually had equilateral triangles going from point to point on the flower of life, each petal. Yeah, that one there. You can make, no, go back, that one. You can actually make tetrahedrons out of those inverted triangles touching each other.
Yes.
And I forget the gentleman's name, but he's usually on the Gaia channel.
Robert Gilbert?
Say again?
Robert Gilbert?
No. He's a quantum physicist, and he delves into the supernatural and into geometry and what have you. And he has calculated the field of the quantum field is interlocking tetrahedrons. He has determined that through his mathematics and what have you. So if the quantum field, if you get interlocking tetrahedrons graphically in this diagram, and in real life, if quantum mechanics is real life, you have the same field, then you have a representation of the quantum field in the flower of life.
I want to speak to that. Thank you so much, Joseph. I had a revelation some decades ago. I looked at a diagram in a book that was written. I can't even think of the name of the book right now, so I'll have to apologize to everyone. But it was a two-dimensional image, and I had this deeply moving, profound revelation where I could actually see the warp and weft of space with this dynamic that you're talking about. But if you look at how carbon atoms are packed close to one another. These carbon atoms that make up the bodies of diamonds, it's actually called carbon tetrahedrons. No, tetrahedral lattices. So you have tetrahedral lattices, which means that you have the string of tetrahedron made out of carbon atoms that makes a diamond a diamond. And so what you just said is actually related to that notion, which actually has me asking the question: is space a fluid or a solid? And of course, you know, some of us who are really smart would say it's both, right? So, and that is also a we call that a trick question for some, but a simple, obvious statement for others. All right. Thanks for giving me a chance to humor myself, at least, with that idea. Okay.
Can I do one more thing? Can you go back to that drawing of the flower?
Yes.
If you look at this, this is a layout of a hydrogen molecule. You got a nucleus, and you got the proton and the electron spinning around it, and that's what this is. It's a field of hydrogen atoms, and hydrogen atoms is the source of all life. It's the source of all matter. You know, when the Big Bang happened, there was nothing but hydrogen atoms that coalesced to make stars. And you all know how a star coalesces, it makes helium, explodes, and from there makes other atoms. But the source, atomic source, is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the atomic source of all things. And therefore, what you're seeing here in the flower of life is a field of hydrogen atoms. So to me, it all clicks and makes sense.
Well, Joseph, I can't speak on this extemporaneously, but we have something called the electric universe theory. And, you know, it is my contention that consciousness swims in this fluid matter. Some people have terms like dark matter, etc. Yeah, it can all be looked at as being geometric patterns in relation to one another.
Yeah. Okay.
So what happens is, when we see these patterns, there's something that is happening in our consciousness where we're being reminded of some sacred dimension of reality. And that's one of the significant purposes behind working with sacred geometry. It does actually help to inform the pedestrian awareness of some deeper truths, so the revelations can take place. And, you know, a lot of times revelations bubble to the surface, and a person may not be aware of where the revelation came from. But that isn't as important as the revelation. You know, knowing where it came from is not nearly as important as having the revelation, sitting with it, allowing it to have an impact upon one's experience as a human in society. Any more questions or comments?
What I did have one other one before you moved on, and when the circle, and you know, and I guess it could represent elliptical, the electron orbits, but that look like the petal of the flower. Is there a significance to the number of petals that are shown? Do they have a relationship to another knowledge that you're supposed to know?
Yeah, we're going to show some images later comparing six-fold symmetry geometry with six-fold symmetry in nature. But the answer is not easy. If someone wants to raise their hand and give an answer to that question, wonderful. But that isn't an answer that I can provide with a few simple words or a very simple statement. The answer is more like yes.
Yes. It's yes. I think this answer, because it's not a simple answer. You know.
Yes, right. Those smaller petals right there, they're called a vesica. If you can see my cursor, what I'm doing right now is I'm tracing something called a vesica Piscis. And that a vesicle Pisces is simply a name for two circles that share a radius, okay? So this vesicle Pisces, here's the center of one circle here, excuse me, and there's the center of another circle there. So this circle, the center of this circle, which, you know, that's the circle there, and the center right here of this other circle, it creates this pattern that looks like a flat football, if I may, and that's called a vesicle Pisces. And there are many stories about the vesicle Pisces that you can entertain yourself with it at another time, but we can't go there tonight. I don't think we're going to go there tonight. But there's a tremendous amount of information in cyberspace about the significance of the vesicle Pisces. In Christian iconography, you have the individual who I like to use the word Yeshua. He's actually framed in a vesicle, and because the individuals who were creating these icons had a knowledge of sacred geometry, and they couldn't talk about it, but they could depict it in their iconography. And I'll speak on that subject later. I'll fast forward and speak on that right now. Here, this image, you see the white rays here, the white rays around this circle that I'm drawing.
Yeah.
All of
Yes.
those white rays are, in my heart and mind, related to the Christian iconography, where you had these halos around these individuals. Okay, the halos represented a high state of consciousness, an evolved state of consciousness, a spiritual awareness. What I have done is I've taken that concept and translated it into my work of art, where many of these compositions have these white rays that reference sentience, they reference an elevated state of awareness, without speaking in terms of heavy duty religious terminology. I use the terms elevated awareness or expanded awareness or heightened awareness or even sentience as a substitute, but I'm actually referencing a quality of consciousness that is alluded to in Christian iconography, where you have the halos. So this actually represents a halo in reality. And here's the vesicle Pisces here. The two blue circles, they create a vesicle Pisces. And once again, I don't want to talk about the vesicle Pisces. If anyone wants to speak on that subject, you can. But it's a subject that I refrain from speaking about a lot. And this image is titled Window to the Golden Temple #2. So it's part of a series where I've created these compositions that might remind someone of an eye. You see, because these two semicircles here would be representative of an open eye, and then this circle would be representative of the pupil, or not the eye, yeah, but the pupil, I say. And of course, there are other symbolism here too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those 9 diamonds inside of this diamond shape. The number 9 is a very special number, and some of you have heard stories about Tesla talking about the numbers 3, 6, and 9. Well, there's some amazing math that some of you may know, which has to do with the number 9. But I will leave that out of this conversation for now. Let's see now. And here is really the beginning of the second half. Some of the following geometric patterns and expressions of 2ness, 3ness, 4ness, 5ness, 6ness, and beyond will be paired with images from nature. It is possible that humans began their relationship with number as a result of observing patterns found in nature. After the electron microscope was invented, we were able to see how sound created patterns. Let's see. I have this. Give me a second. Let's see if I can move this. Okay, thank you. I had something on my screen. We were able to see how sound create patterns in small particulates such as sand and other particulates placed on a flat surface. This is known as cymatics. It is now a science, and it's becoming popularized, and lots of people are seeing evidence of cymatics. I started to add a slide, which I didn't, of different notes that give you different geometric patterns. But some of you, like I said, are familiar with cymatics. This diagram right here is simply a very complex diagram that I don't want to talk about right now. Here we have images of six-fold symmetry on the left. All of these patterns that you see are stamps from vegetation. And you have five-fold symmetry here in purple. That's a cross-section of a star fruit. All of the larger circles that you see here are actually acorn caps. The blue pattern here is actually half of a black walnut. And so these circles inside of this red five-pointed star, those are two concentric circles that are made with two different sized acorn caps. Here is a cross-section of an okra. Okra here, okra there. Here you have a red stamp that's made from okra. So you have stamps from vegetation that create a geometric pattern, and it happens to be six-fold symmetry. And on the right-hand side is a geometric drawing, which happens to be something that I created. I colored in a black and white drawing that my mentor created many years ago. So it's sort of like a collaboration between my mentor and myself. We were busy collaborating from day one when I met him in 1989, bouncing ideas off of each other and fueling the fire of creativity. This is another print that's made from vegetation. And these purple florets that you see here, my cursor is at the top of the panel on the right. These purple florets are actually the cross-section of a bottom of a celery stalk, where you cut the celery off and you have this beautiful floret. On the left is a detail of the center of this composition. So on the left, you see, it's easier to read it. All of the dots here that you see are the tips of an okra dipped into the paint and pressed upon the paper. But can everyone see this black line right here that I'm drawing the cursor over? Can you see that black line right there? Okay, well, anyway, Smith, can you see that black line where my cursor is tracing?
I'm looking for your cursor.
On the left-hand side.
Oh, left-hand side. Yes, I do. Uh-huh.
Okay. So
it's
that
near
black,
the center.
Yes, right. That black line is near the center that I'm tracing with the cursor. There are 10 of those black lines because there are 10 circles in this composition, 10 circles that are made with a pencil or graphite on the paper that gave me some idea as to where to place the vegetation to create the stamps. Okay, so it was my guide, sort of like somebody that's creating a pattern. Quilters would be very familiar with this idea. The little green pattern that you see right here at the bottom of this form, that's actually a piece of vegetation. I think it's called Chinese okra, or maybe it's, anyway, it's a cross section of a piece of vegetation that has 10 little ribs on it. So this was one of the prints that I did as a demonstration to a group of students in the year 2008 at Duke's Continuing Ed. I had a group of high school students that were from across the planet, and I was teaching them this technique. We had so many amazing results through the 3 years of my teaching this technology, and we have had people that have taken this and take it back to their homes or their communities or to their families and shared it. So it's a beautiful thing to see. I feel like I'm Johnny Appleseed, planting seeds, and might never see the results. Here's an old Sufi saying, "Love is a fire, I am wood." And I fell in love with that Sufi saying a long time ago. And my response to that, my creative response is, love is a river, I am water. So those two thoughts can be thought of as Sufi sayings. I sometimes think of myself as a Sufi. It's a pretty comfortable title to wear. This mandala is made of 13 sets of concentric circles that read as 13 rings. And so you can see the red rings. I think that would be 6 red rings and 6 blue rings and 1 purple ring. So, the mind works the way I'm about to speak. We assign meaning to symbols. And so the meaning that I assign to this symbol is that the blue and the red circles represent the polarized political dynamics in America. And the purple wants to represent a synthesis or a merging or marrying of those two polarized opposites. And my contention is this is the only way we're going to get out of this insane downward spiral that we've been in for centuries, is to find the center path, the middle path between two polar opposites, if I may. So that's my poetic and metaphorical reference to polarity consciousness in general, and certainly politically polarized conscious in America. This on the left is a six-fold symmetry diagram, but if you look at these little areas of color here, here's a purple here, purple there, that represents a spiral, or it suggests a spiral. So sort of like a spiraling to the center. So you have a spiraling to the center here, a spiraling to the center here, a spiraling to the center or towards the center. On the right, you have a cross-section of a red cabbage. And I think it's easy for everyone to see the spiraling patterns. So I can't see everyone on the screen, but I would love to know if there's a raise of hands. How many people have actually cut a cabbage and been able to see the spiraling pattern? And Smith, do you see any hands raising? Hello, Smith? Is anyone there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm glad to have my mic muted. I see 4 and some pop-ups of a couple more, it seems like. So,
okay,
yes.
just curious. I'm glad to know I'm not the only person that has seen this beautiful spiraling pattern in a cross-section of a cabbage. So if you cut a cabbage, just like you would cut an apple, and I don't have references to apples, but let me just scroll quickly through it. That's a cross-section of, or half of a hickory nut in the middle here. And these are inner spirals from conch shells. And so the spiral, I'm talking about the spiral here in this diagram. I'm talking about the spiral here. I'm choosing to refrain from talking about the havoc wreaking that we just witnessed in the form of what is called Hurricane Helena or Helen or whatever. Some of the audience knows that there's more to the story than what is being presented in the news or the news for the masses. And so a natural hurricane would have spiraling arms in it, just like the spirals in the Milky Way and the many spirals in nature. There are more spirals than I could talk about. I'm not even sure if I put a head of a sunflower in here, but I think I did, yes. Anyway, these spirals are actually the result of what I call the invisible architecture of matter. Some people think of this invisible architecture of matter as being the astral body. So not only do humans have astral bodies, but everything in nature has an astral body. And that's a pretty loaded statement. I saw that Larry Burke was on the call, or is on the call perhaps, and I'm sure that he would have something to say about this idea of the invisible field of awareness that some of us call the dream body or the astral body. Lots of people have experience with it, but it is my contention that everything that grows in nature has a what we could say invisible to the naked eye energetic counterpart that I call the blueprint or the astral body for the physical body. And here you have two-fold symmetry. You have bilateral symmetry. So what you see on the left-hand side is identical to what you see on the right-hand side. And the same thing with the dragonfly. So we have many examples. The human body, you look at the outside of a human body and you have bilateral symmetry. A frog, a whale, a horse, just about anything that grows in nature that is self-propelled has bilateral symmetry. well, excuse me, almost anything. We have octopus and we have other creatures that have more appendages than two or more than two sides, maybe. We could say that even an octopus has bilateral symmetry in a manner of speaking. That would be a true statement to be made. So here you have more bilateral symmetry in this composition on the left, this composition on the right. If you just draw a line right down the center, what you see on the left is identical to what you see on the right. And so bilateral means two sides, having two sides. Here's, once again, the hickory nut, and that's an interesting pattern on the interior. A lot of these cross sections of hickory nuts and walnuts actually read as a heart. And it's actually in the heart of the nut. So that's another interesting comment.
Quick question, Vandorn.
Yes.
I noticed that April had still had her hand up. I didn't know, April, if you had a question previous to what he's presenting.
Hello?
I do not. Thank you, Smith.
I just wanted to give her a chance to ask it if she did have a question, but go ahead, continue.
Oh, so the answer is no question, no comment?
At the time, but I would like to ask you if you could during the Q&A to talk about the hurricane, because now you got my interest queued up a little bit.
Okay, well, it was not a real hurricane. That's a declarative statement that I'm making. And if the men in black show up at my door, you'll know that I told the great truth, and they said he can't tell this truth, so we're going to cancel his act. Okay. All jokes aside, there's more information that is being attempting to be shared about that. But once again, we'll talk about that later. But you can find it because Smith, I know you have friends that keep their ear close to the ground and not tethered to what some of us call mainstream media. Okay, so you'll find all of the information that you want and more than you want to know actually about this fabricated weather event. But
thank you. But I would, but I had not heard what you just mentioned, and if you are willing to share or inclined to share, I think this group might want to hear it. Okay. Well,
I wanted to open up the session earlier with a prayer for all who have whose lives have been altered and damaged to a point of no return and destroyed as a result of this manipulation of the elements. So, but that prayer has been alive in my heart and my consciousness. I did not state it earlier because you asked us to go into a period of silence. And so I simply entertained that thought during that period of silence that you asked us to enter. Here are two six-fold symmetry patterns. The one on the right is actually an unfinished composition that I was working on once. All of these patterns are actually cross sections. You see five-fold symmetry here in this light blue. That's actually the cross-section of a bell pepper. These red stamps are actually cross-sections of either apples or pears. It can be a pear or an apple. And in some pears and in some apples, there are actually other little five-fold symmetry references, like these five little dots that you see my cursor touching on. But you almost always have these five pockets where seeds are nested inside of the apple, inside of the pear. And there may be other things that grow in nature that have these pockets. On the left-hand side is a sacred geometry composition that I created back in 1990. And the words are, I always have everything I need. So that's like a mantra. And I simply did this as a sort of like a prayerful thought. I gave it to someone as a gift. As a way of saying, if you'll simply think and simply say, I always have everything I need, that in itself is a prayer. And those who know something about the power of the spoken word, it is understood that what we say is actually an act of creation. Okay, so at the top, Smith, would you read that for me? The statement?
Yes, I can. When one's consciousness becomes like a mandala, illusions of separation disappear.
That was just written 2 days ago. And these types of commentaries pour through my awareness, I do my best to spend as much time as I can in a state of what some people would call meditation, prayerfulness, separated from the terrors and the horrors of the world theater. My contention is where thought goes, body follows. And so if I think of myself as a conscious co-creator, it's my responsibility to focus on and accentuate what some people would call the positive. You know, some of you know the name Al Jarreau from the past. Accentuate the positive was one of his theses that he walked with. And so some on the call are familiar with this notion that the more we place our attention on what we can conveniently call a desirable outcome or the positive, the more likely that outcome is. Many of you know about all of the beautiful experiences that have been had by people who have practiced transcendental meditation in groups and gone to cities and reduced the crime rate significantly as a result of just being in this state of transcendence from dualistic thinking. It's called transcendental meditation, and there are other groups. I can't think of one of the person's names who I used to be. James Twyman, that's his name. Beautiful soul that spent decades traveling around doing these meditations and effecting change in every city and every environment that they went to. Here's an example of fiveness inside of a tomato. Well, tomatoes also have other numbers. I actually cut open a tomato this past summer, and there was tenfold symmetry inside of it. You can actually have sixfold symmetry, tenfold symmetry, fivefold symmetry. Some tomatoes, some small tomatoes actually have threefold symmetry. The word symmetry means sections, essentially. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this, so those are just simply two halves of the same tomato. On the right-hand side is a composition titled A Hymn for the Celestial Ambient, which has fourfold symmetry, 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. But you also have this blue circle that has 8 lines. And so that gives you 8 sections on the inside. So it's an expression of 8-fold symmetry and 4-fold symmetry. And once again, you have the halos that represent illuminated consciousness. And even if a person doesn't know what I'm saying graphically, the subconscious mind gets it. And the subconscious mind reads what is written. And it's simply a matter of when and where on the timeline what is seen is registers at the conscious level, at the pedestrian level. And I hope everyone understands what I'm implying here, because what I'm suggesting is that I have just delivered a message by showing this composition. The message has layers of meaning, and those layers of meaning will unfold in a person's psyche as what this thing that we call time progresses. And it is none of my business when these revelations occur. My job was to simply deliver the glyph or the alchemical formula, is what I call them. And it works as it will work, and when it will work, and where it will work, or where it wants to work, and when it wants to work. Both of these are expressions of tenfold symmetry. Here's a mandarin whose pill has been removed, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you look at it from the top down. This composition on the right is another tenfold symmetry mandala created using vegetation stamps from nature. And it's titled Solar Heart Mandala. Yeah, a lot of these compositions have been distributed across the world, thanks to those classes that I taught at Duke University's continuing ed. A lot of beautiful, beautiful teaching and a lot of beautiful learning and a lot of beautiful sharing as a result. On the left is sixfold symmetry. That happens to be a blossom on a cucumber. I think it's called a lemon cucumber. And so pollination that takes place everywhere. With the lemon cucumber, you have a sixfold symmetry blossom and you have a fivefold symmetry blossom. One of the emphasis that I'm attempting to place on this presentation is that nature gives us a sense of number. And the more that we look at nature, the more we realize that number is everywhere. But back to the cucumber, you have a 5-fold symmetry, 5-petal blossom on the same plant that you have a 6-fold symmetry, 6-petal blossom. And the insects that travel from one blossom to the other is actually the pollinator. I'm not so sure which one becomes a cucumber, whether it's the 5-petal flower or the 6-petal flower, but one of those blossoms becomes a cucumber. And it may be that someone knows that both of them become a cucumber, but I know one or the other or both becomes a cucumber. On the right-hand side is 6-fold symmetry. This is all done using the genesis of this composition is 3 circles that share a radius. So here's an arcing line that you see here that represents one of the larger circles whose center is right here at the top. And then you have another arcing line here that represents the other circle that's whose center is over here to the right. And then you have this point right here that this other circle arcing here is, so these 3 circles is what makes it possible to draw this diagram. No more circles were drawn, just 3 circles, and I drew lines connecting those 3 intersections of those 3 circles. And then I kept dividing the plane using a strategy that is known in some circles. And I created this, what's called, some people think of this as a KOCH crystal. There's a person whose last name is KOCH, a mathematician, who said that if you divided a line into 3 equal sections, and then you fold that line, you could create a pyramid shape. So each one of these edges of this pattern has what would be considered a Koch crystal quality. This is all fractal. So you have small fractals. The smallest fractal, I'm actually wrote, okay, let's go to the center. Smallest fractal is in yellow. And then the next larger, when I say fractal, let me correct myself. The smallest 6-pointed star is in the center. It's color-coded yellow, but the lines are red. Then the next larger 6-pointed star is color-coded red. And then you have the next larger 6-pointed star here, the next larger 6-pointed star. Each one of these 6-pointed stars have a fractal relationship to one another. But to make sense of that is rather difficult. I can simply tell you that if you look over here at this blue 6-pointed star, and it actually has more points than 6, but we recognize the 6 points that I'm tracing here. That blue 6-pointed star is actually echoed here in this 6-pointed star on the interior in red. They're the very same size. Now, there's much more that can be said about this. And unless anyone has a question about it or comment about it, I would like to keep moving. I'm willing to entertain questions or comments about this if you have any. Okay, these are collages, and the same pattern that you saw a moment ago on the left-hand side here is that same fractal pattern that I conveniently named fractal brain, thanks to a dialogue with someone. In the background, there you see it in the background, that's the abacus for learning, okay? In the gray to black circles, the same thing on the right panel, the abacus for learning. And then you have all of these other geometric patterns on the interior. Well, some of you know the golden ratio, the golden rectangle, the golden pattern. I'm going to trace this with my cursor here. This rectangle right here on the left-hand side, that large rectangle happens to be a golden rectangle. And so there's a quality to golden rectangle. If you take a small square here and you have another square that's larger by proportion, 0.618, then the next square is larger than this one by the same proportion. So this edge, if this edge is 1, then this edge right here equals 1.618, the same with this edge. Then that would make this edge right here equaling 2.618. And then you would have this next section would be an addition of 1.618 plus 2.618, and do the math. And then the next one would be an addition of the 2.618 plus this section would give you the size of this larger square. So the golden proportion is a phenomenon that is related to the Fibonacci numbers, but they're not identical to one another. And so what I want to suggest to you is that what you have are representations of the golden rectangle in both of these compositions. The same thing is happening over here. If you look at the one on the right-hand side, looking where my cursor is, we're actually beginning the golden spiral here. And it's arcing out into space. It arcs underneath this square pattern here, comes over here, and then arcs over here. And this contains so much information that's related to organic matter that doesn't have to be spoken in words. It registers at the subconscious level. So what I'm suggesting to everyone is that these compositions are packed with information that does affect the subconscious mind, that do factor into one's thinking and one's feeling. And so a person might say, well, I feel a lot better about life today after having seen this work of art, and I don't know why. They don't have to know why. I'll say that the alchemical formula is doing exactly what it was designed to do. These are two compositions that were created for a group exhibition in San Francisco. It was a red and white wine celebration. Someone whose name I think is Haratsi, who brought some vines from another country, I think 200 years ago. They were celebrating the arrival of this person in the Americas because he began wineries in California. So you have this beautiful spiral here on the left-hand side that arcs all the way to the center. And each one of these triangular shapes here actually represents a tetrahedron. So this actually represents a three-dimensional form. On the right-hand side, there are spirals here. If you go down to the bottom left-hand corner, and if you take this line here, this white line, and run over here, and run over there, run over there, run over there, over there, over there, over there, that's actually tracing a spiraling path rotating towards the center. So you have the same thing in red here, rotating towards the center. And you have these spiraling pathways. Here's another one, spiraling towards the center. This composition is made of two golden rectangles. And I'm going to show you which ones they are. Here's the smallest golden rectangle here. Well, it isn't the smallest. Okay, let me go back. You have two different golden rectangles, and you'll have to study this on your own. I apologize. There are only two golden rectangles, which means that if this length right here, if the shortest length is 1, then the longest length right here would be 1.618. The same thing with this golden rectangle right here that I'm tracing with my cursor. If this shortest length is 1, then this longest length, those two longest lengths of this isosceles triangle would be 1.618. So this is a body of knowledge that has been transferred from one generation to another, generally through what we conveniently call craft guilds or secret schools where you teach this knowledge. I think it was Plato or Pythagoras. Pythagoras, you had these bodies of knowledge that some of you know about that were not taught openly for reasons which I don't want to get into. Here are two more of these beautiful spiraling pathways. In this particular case, you have two spirals that are identical to one another. One is a smaller spiral. The largest spiral is traced here. The smallest spiral is traced here. There are a lot of people that are doing some amazing things with the golden proportion, with these golden spirals. Here is what would be considered the genesis of this pattern here. So you actually begin with two small circles that my cursor is touching here. And then those two small circles makes it possible for you to create a square that then you create a relationship between these two segments, these two line segments. One would be considered 0.618, the other one would be considered 1. Then you go from 0.618 to 1 to 1.618, and then to 2.618 ad infinitum. And so you have this beautiful spiraling of a square here, square there, square there, square there, square there, square there, square there. And you could continue to create squares. You could create one out to the right here. You could go at infinitum. And once again, artists are working with this. Artists have worked with the golden proportion for centuries. And now more artists are working with it simply because there's more talk about sacred geometry in the what I'll call popular culture. Here's something that I alluded to earlier. Here's a golden spiral here. And then the golden rectangle is here. So the golden spiral is nested inside of the golden rectangle. You have 4 golden rectangles. Here's another one. And here's another one there, and then there's another one here. Those 4 golden rectangles have a very specific relationship to one another. And it just so happens that some of these circles have a golden proportion relationship to one another. But that isn't important to understand. What's important to consider is the fact that these are color-coded. So you have red, you have a semicircle that's red, semicircle that's orange, semicircle that's yellow, semicircle that's color-coded green, one blue, and the last 2 are simply different shades of lavender or purple to represent the last 2 rays, indigo and violet. So what I'm doing is I'm attempting to represent the 7 rays, the 7 rays of visible light. But once again, doing that with indigo and violet, it reads somewhat strangely. So I generally use 2 different shades of lavender or purple. And here written is some reference to what I'm doing. The all-encompassing white circle on the outer perimeter represents this luminous sheath of light that some people call the auric field or the aura, but also it can represent a state of ecstasy, a state of illumined consciousness. So it's poetry. It's 2-dimensional poetry. A rose of Sharon blossom on the left, 5-fold symmetry, beautiful 5-fold symmetry, and then a mandala that's 5-fold symmetry. This mandala actually has a fractal phenomenon because you have a smaller, it's hard to call this a pentagon, it's a pentagonal shape here with a smaller one on the interior. You have a pentagon within a pentagon within a pentagon, but you also have these beautiful rounded pentagrams on the outside. You have one here, 1 petal, 2 petals, 3 petals, 4 petals, 5 petals. At the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each one of these 5-petaled forms has a fractal relationship to one another because there's a scaling here. And I can't say that it is the golden proportion scaling, but I believe that it is, but I don't want to make that as an absolute statement. And the pomegranate, some of you know that the pomegranate is actually part of the Jewish religious tradition. I actually included it because today happens to be, which day is it? Can someone tell me again? Is it Rosh Hashanah? Can anyone raise their hand?
Yes, it is Rosh Hashanah, the
Rosh
new
Hashanah.
year.
Yeah, the New
Jewish New Year.
The Jewish New Year. So, and this particular pomegranate actually gives you 5-fold symmetry and 6-fold symmetry, just as many things in nature do. And so in this particular one, we have the rounded edge here that counts as one corner. Here's another corner, 2, 3 here, 4 here, 5 here, and 6 here. So this 6-fold symmetry is actually mirrored on the interior. Here's a 1 section, 2nd section, 3rd section, 4th section, 5th section, and 6th section. So on the right-hand side, you have an 8-petaled flower called a cosmos flower by some. And so you have a representation of 6-fold symmetry and 8-fold symmetry. Once again, if we would just let nature be our teacher, here's reference to the sunflower blossom. And if you look to the right, this is a magnification of what's on the left-hand side. you can see these spiraling patterns here. All of those spiraling patterns are related to the golden spiral. And there's talk about the left turning spiral and the right turning spiral having a different number signature to it, but I can't speak those numbers, but people generally think of those number signatures being the Fibonacci numbers. So some people will say 34 and 55, 34 with the left turning and 55 with the right turning, or 55 with the left turning and 89 with the left turning spiral. But once again, beautiful representation of what human beings, you can almost see a geometric shape on the interior. Right here looks once suggestive of one of the points. There's another point there, but I'm not saying that this is a perfect geometric shape, but it almost references, the heart of it almost references a star point. Okay, you can almost see that, but once again, I can't call it 1 here, 2, 3, maybe 4 here, maybe 5, it might be 6-fold symmetry. And here's 5-ness on the left-hand side. This is something that I'd like to take a minute to talk about, because all of this vegetation that we have seen represented in these mandalas that I showed earlier, each one of those pieces of vegetation has a number, represents a number. 1-ness with the tips of the okra, 2-ness with some of the peppers, some of the smaller peppers, some of the cross sections of, or the halves of nuts, the 5-lobed red bell pepper. You also have 3-lobed red bell peppers. And in the green ones, you actually have 3-lobed, 4-lobed, and 5-lobed. I think you have 4, 3, and 5 with the red bell peppers also. There's something to that. I have not had anyone answer the question for me, how is it that we have 3-ness, 4-ness, and 5-ness in the bell peppers, but you have the same thing in squash, zucchini squash in particular. You have 3-ness, 4-ness, and 5-ness. You have different numbers in different vegetation. Cross sections of melons gives you, generally gives you 3-ness, whether it's in a banana, the same thing, cucumber, the same thing. The pattern on the right-hand side, I couldn't resist it. It's a 5 oak leaves all together on a stem. First time I've ever seen this. I've seen 3 before, and I've seen 2, but this first time I had ever seen 5. And so I said, okay, I'll take a photograph of this and share it. So it doesn't have any profound, far-reaching implications and meaning, simply a beautiful reference to the number 5. So I'm showing these 2 references to 5-ness together. Here is the spiral again with the top-down view of a pineapple. And you see reference to spiraling pattern. And spirals, you have spirals to the left and you have spirals to the right. This is a right turning spiral towards the center. Then you have a left turning spiral going towards the center here. And that's true for each one of these rows. You have a left turning spiral and a right turning spiral with a different count of these little sections with the different spirals. When the left turning has 1 count and then the right turning has another count. And this composition on the right-hand side, we call it a pineapple. You have spiraling here. You have spiraling to the right and you have spiraling to the left. And some of you know from what we consider metaphysical teachings that the pineal gland, or pineal gland, is actually in the shape of a pine cone, and it actually has crystals in it. And the brain has crystals in it. And the body has crystals in it also, in the inner ear and in other parts of the body, and not highly popularized information. But all of these crystals have as their foundation the geometry of the atomic structures, which are the foundation for the molecular structures, which are the foundations for the cellular structures, et cetera, et cetera. And something that I don't have here is a visual reference to all of these beautiful images that are shown to us now because of these large telescopes. My contention is we're looking at organic matter. So when you see all of these beautiful, seemingly organic looking configurations due to these newly presented images, my contention is that it is organic matter. So is there a body within a body within a body within a body ad infinitum in terms of a human body or any other body for that matter? Questions that I can't answer, but beautiful questions to ponder. This diagram in the middle is actually a reproduction, as in I drew this composition for someone who wanted a composition that my mentor had created many years ago. But the only image that we had of the composition was a very poor digital file. It was a photograph, actually. So it took me a long time to do this, but I recreated composition, learned a lot. So what you have squares that are spiraling towards the center. In this particular case, I think these are groups of 5 squares that are spiraling towards the center. But you could actually have more squares. One of my friends here on the call, Jana, has worked with this composition before in a painting and possibly in many other ways. And it is understood to be related to the rose windows in the Chartres Cathedral. And in many places, you will find this reference to this 12-fold symmetry of spiraling to the center, but you have the spirals to the left that are identical to the spirals to the right, which are referenced on the pine cone and the pineapple and many other things that grow in nature. These are yes, go ahead.
May I ask a question, Vandorn? A
Please.
couple. I'm enjoying the examples, and usually by this time we usually take a couple of minutes of break. Do we want to have a couple of minutes and then come back? Do you have more examples to share?
Oh, I just have a few more examples, but we can take a break now, and I can share the last few. Let me just flash the last.
What is the degree? Would you folks like to take maybe a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll do the rest of your slides, and then we'll also get into a few minutes of Q&A. And yes. I think I've seen a couple of questions that are in the text here, so we'll ask those at that time.
Let's run with the questions. Thank you.
Okay, so let's take a break if you'd like to now, and we'll do that a 5-minute break, folks. And we can continue to talk while in that 5-minute break if you don't need a break. And that's what this is all about. We're here to share. So I've got 8:40 right now. So at 8:45 we'll start back up, and feel free to talk with each other or or text to each other as needed or as you would like. See you in about 5 minutes.
What I'll do, Smith, is I'll simply show the last 2 or 3 slides, and then we can come back and have a half an hour of discussion.
Okay. Yeah, if we can definitely do that. Let's do that. That sounds like a good idea.
Okay, here we go. These are geometric forms that I actually had created for me, 3-dimensionally printed in metal. And the one on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, it's the same form, different configuration. It's the dodecahedron on the inside, and there's a form called the rhombi-icosa dodecahedron, which simply means that what you have is you have the 12 pentagonal faces of a pentagon, you have the 20 equilateral triangles of an icosahedron, and you have 30 squares, which give you the squares of 5 cubes. So that's 20 plus 12 plus 30. Is that 62, I believe? Yeah. So that's 62 polygons that make up the outer shell. And you can read what's on the page here, so I don't have to make reference to that. This is another group. The one on the left is called the harmonizing resonator. Each one of these forms has a different quality to it, has a different energetic signature. And these energetic signatures are actually related to the geometries in our bodies and the geometries in gemstones, but also other geometries, but in particular, the geometries in gemstones. Buckminster Fuller, by the way, the one on the left-hand side, has the outside, the outer shell is called In some circles, it's called a Buckminster-Fuller ring. It's also called a carbon-60. So I wish I had a picture of the carbon-60 molecule. The carbon-60 molecule is found in all organic matter. All carbon life forms have in the cells a carbon-60 molecule made of 60 carbon atoms that have this very same configuration. So right here where my cursor is, and right there where my cursor is, and right there, and right there, and right there, there would be 5 carbon molecules that have a very specific relationship to one another. And then you'd have 6 carbon molecules in relation to one another here. So some on the call understand that carbon-60 is being used for health benefits and health purposes. And Buckminster-Fuller goes down in history as a significant player in the world when it comes to the cosmic geometries. I'm going to use the word cosmic geometries. And so the one on the right actually has a three-axis cross on the interior. And it has the very same outer shell as the one that I showed you before, this one, but a completely different inner shell. And this inner shell, some of you know the name Drunvalo Melchizedek, and he talks about these different antennae in the head, an antenna, invisible to the eyes, one coming out the left side of the head, one coming out of the right side of the head, one coming out of the top of the head, front of the head, the back of the head, and of course, one going down one's throat, if I may use that term, and down the central column. These 6 antennae are related to these 6 paths here. If you see where my cursor is here, that's one of the portals. There's another portal there. There are actually 6 portals all leading to the center. Each one of these portals is actually a golden rectangle, has a golden rectangle as the size, has the square as the face. So that don't know what to call that except to say that you have a tube that has a golden proportion in it. So you have 6 tubes that are pointing towards the center, but they also point outwardly. And some of you who know something about Native American traditions, we talk about the 7 directions: the north, south, east, the west, the above, the below, and the within. And this particular form is related to that notion of above, below, north, south, east, west, and within the 7 directions. Okay, well, I'll read this. The patterns we identify as sacred geometry are visual evidence of a supreme and all-embracing cosmic intelligence. Everything that we see in nature points our attention in the direction of acknowledgement of this statement. When one opens their awareness to the relationship between sacred geometry patterns and the patterns that we find in nature, something of cosmic significance happens. To witness these patterns and rest in a stillness and silence beyond thoughts and words is a key to revelations that await you. Everything is pattern and therefore has a meaning that wishes to be acknowledged. Nature inspires our human perceptions of beauty and leads us back to its nurturing bosom. And these 2 compositions. Now, this one on the right is actually a double 10-fold symmetry mandala. So the red mandala that you see pointing in one direction and the blue mandala that you see pointing in the other direction, it's the very same shape. They're interlocking, so it's a variation on the theme yin yang. I gave it the title Sentences, a Song for the New Earth, simply because, once again, we're talking about polarity and polarity consciousness. Blue representing one camp, red representing another. And here are these purple circles that enclose both of these forms. So some of you know from studying religion, the history of religion, that the color purple was used as an influence upon the consciousness of, what do we call them? The individuals who were being preached to, I'll say, okay? The congregation, that's the term I was trying to find. And these 2 circles on the inner here, blue circle here, illuminated with white rays, red circle here, illuminated with white rays. this, and here's the vesica Pisces here in the center. This has to do with sharing. So you have a large vesica here, not a vesica Pisces, but you have a large vesica here because the red shape and the blue shape are enclosed inside of these purple circles. So this wants to be considered a metaphysical subliminal seduction. How about that? That's a new term, metaphysical subliminal seduction. But I would say everything that I create is a metaphysical subliminal seduction. On the left is the same pattern that we began with, the 7 flower of life patterns. One's frequency is determined by how frequently one chooses to be the frequency of love. And this is a statement that I made. I do it all of the time. I write like this every day. Here's me working on that beautiful pattern that you saw earlier, the 12-fold symmetry mandala. And that's all of the images. And so where do we go from here?
That was excellent. What do you, would you like to, how would you like to wrap it up?
Oh, what I would like to say is that I don't want you to hold me responsible for any metaphysical or spiritual or emotional or psychological upheaval that you experience as a result of having this experience, because it is entirely possible. Honestly, these images are loaded with profound meaning, and it's always a matter of who's seeing them as to what they will get from them. But doors in one's consciousness, doors in one's psyche are subject to open as a result of seeing these. And who knows, some doors might close. Those might be the doors that we want to close. I'm attempting to have some fun with that. But anyway, I don't know what else to say other than I'm happy to be here. It's a joy to have the audience that I have. Some of the people that joined us tonight are people that I know who have interesting views on these subjects that I've broached. One person's name is Herb Bennett, another's name is Jana, and possibly a few others. I'm not sure. Of course, Joseph spoke earlier, Joseph Astorita. We also have an architect here, Joseph Louis, someone who I love dearly. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful spirit. Hi to Joseph. If you can see on the screen, Joseph, can you raise your hand so everybody can see who Joseph is? Hello, Joseph.
Hi, Vandorn.
Great to see you. Yes.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Thanks for
Enjoyed
joining
this
us.
very much.
Thank you so much, Jake. Thank you for joining us. Yes. Yes. So the way I feel about Joseph and myself is that we share something that is cosmic of the heart, and it's just a beautiful rapport that we have with each other. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and I did have a connection in the very beginning when you were showing the flower of life and the geometries there.
Yes.
I did get the vision of these two mathematical ideas of irrational math, the circles, the irrationalness of the infinite that was represented by the flower of life and the I forget the learning mechanism.
Yeah. Well, you know, Joseph, what's fascinating is that my mentor has made it possible for humankind to be able to think of the stories that we've heard before about this being an irrational number, like the square root of 2. Thanks to geometry in the plane, we have mathematics in the plane now, and you can factor the square root. You can factor any square root. And if you can factor a square root, as in divide it, you can no longer call it irrational because it can be factored, okay?
But there's still some aspects of the mathematics like phi and pi and some of these geometries like the circle that are, you know, they're infinite, right?
Watch this. There's this beautiful soul who lives in Australia. His name is Jane, Jain. Jane has come up with a new number for pi. It is not the 1 point whatever, but I'm not going to say that I know what it is because I don't remember it. But he's a highly intelligent researcher that's been doing this research for 40 years now, and you can just go look up Jane 108, and you can tune into that station, and you're going to find just a wealth of information. And I want to say that there's a man named Herb Bennett that is doing some other amazing work. He calls his thesis design science, if I may, and I might be wrong by calling his thesis design science. He has some understandings that he walks with that, as far as I'm concerned, are related to this conversation. And also this man named Michael Evans. I don't know Michael Evans' age. He's my senior. Herb Bennett's my senior. Both of these guys have been at this for decades. And so they have a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge and deep insights to share with anybody that will look them up. Just look up Herbert Bennett, Design Science, or look up Michael Evans, and I don't know what he calls his thing, but it's Michael Evans. Jane 108 has done a presentation on Michael Evans' thesis. So if you go to Jane 108, you can actually look up the Michael Evans presentation that he did. I think he might have interviewed Michael Evans.
Yeah, I'm a little familiar.
Yes.
J-A-I-N.
All right.
Hello?
Can I just interject for just 1 second? I'm gonna bring the end to your presentation, if that's okay, and then we'll go into the question and answer.
Yes.
And all I was going to say is thank you so much for presenting to our group tonight, Vandorn. We have totally enjoyed having you here. And everyone, if you'd like to give them a hand so you can see it. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Please, thank you.